Finish grinding. So finish grinding to me is definitely a love-hate relationship. I really like it because this is the point that you get the true look of the knife you're after. But I hate it because, man, all it takes is one little misstep, one fraction of a second, and your vision for your design can be completely destroyed. So I do a few things to help minimize that. Like, for instance, down here where I want my plunge line, I typically get my bevels up to this place I want them before I actually start taking this to the plunge line. That way I can focus just on this area. Everything else will be basically done. Then I can focus on this, and with a little bit of luck, I don't screw up that plunge line. Now, of course, you can do this with a jig, but I'm not a fan of jigs because it limits what you can do. I mean, obviously jigs work because a lot of people use them, but I personally would rather just freehand it, become better and better at being able to do exactly what I want with the bevel. So I'm going to get over to the grinder, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the flats to a higher grit, clean them up, and get them to like a 120 or a 220, 240, somewhere around there. And then once I've done that, I'm going to spray this with some Dicom and then draw some lines, some scribe lines, so I know exactly where my center is going to be, and I know exactly where my bevels are going to go to. You don't always have to do the scribe lines. Sometimes I don't do the bevel heights, but I almost always do a center, just depending. But I mean, sometimes I'll just eyeball everything. It usually comes out pretty good. So heading over to the grinder. There's a couple things to keep in mind when you're over here on doing your finish grinding. So the first thing is you need to have some light. So basically, if you can get light coming from this direction and this direction, you're going to be able to see everything a lot better when you're trying to keep an eye on your lines. So I've got one big light up here that's pretty much always on, so I can get some nice light on the face of my platen. And then I've also got these little sewing lights that are pretty amazing. They're really cheap on Amazon. I did a little review for these, and I can put a link up here. And then down in the description, I've always got some affiliate links for stuff that I use in the shop a lot. Anyway, so they'll attach really nicely right here, and you just turn it on and all of a sudden you've got light coming from both directions, and you can see really well to ensure that you can grind right up to your lines where you want. So don't really need that yet, but what I typically do after the quench is I just throw the blade on one of these little magnets. These work really well. I just pop it on there like that. And then I just clean up the flats. Just like that. Doesn't take much. Doesn't take much at all. Then flip it over to the other side. Do the same thing. Okay, pretty good there. I'm gonna throw some 220 on here. This one, yeah, this one's a little bit worn, but should do what we need it to. And then here's another thing, these little abrasive eraser things. So you can get these pretty much at any abrasives company. Also, Harbor Freight carries these. So they're not a lot cheaper at Harbor Freight, but they're cheaper and they're usually easier to come by. Just swing in there, pick one up, good to go. So we'll just clean that gunk out of there. And then take this up to a 220. So when I do this, when I did the 120, I was straight up and down like this. When I do the 220, I'll turn it just a little bit. So just like hand sanding, I can keep an eye on whether or not I've gotten rid of all the 120 scratches. Almost there. Yep, I think we're good there. And I'm going to give this a little dip in the water, cool it down a little bit. And of course, you don't have to do it like this. You don't have to use the magnet. You can always drag it straight across. There's a lot of different methods to get to where you want to go. Okay, I think we're good there. So the last thing I want to do is I want to clean up the edges, the spine and the edge. That way I can get rid of any decarb that was on there and then also make a nice clean surface to put my scribe lines on. So to do that, I'm going to throw a contact wheel on here. I can't remember. Yep, I use this bigger one to get in there, to get those contours, the recurve in the blade. So I left my 220 on here. Nope, I did not use the 8-inch. I used my 6-inch. Or, sorry, that's not an 8-inch, that's a 10-inch. But I did use the 6-inch for this recurve. There we go. That looks better. Yep. All right. So as you can see, I've got this pretty good. I think I missed a couple little scratch marks right down here, but we're gonna grind those right away with the bevel. And cleaned up the spine, cleaned up the edge. So now I just need to throw some dicom on here. Man, I got some big old flies flying around in here, and they keep coming right up to the microphone for whatever reason. But anyway. So I'm going to get all of it. I'm going to get the spine, the edge, the sides, and I'm going to put scribe lines on the edge, the spine, and then where I want the bevels. Good enough. Give it a spray on the back. Okay, I haven't really decided exactly how high I want this bevel. So just gonna kind of eyeball it. I think that's too high. I'm gonna go right there. So take my little dividers, and then I just want to follow the curve of the blade. And then do the same thing on the other side. Like so. And then what I'm gonna do for the plunge line is I'm gonna come about halfway into this little curve right here. And then just kind of swing it around like this. This may end up coming up more straight, but we'll see what happens. So just want it to kind of flow right into that curve. This makes it a little bit harder because the blade edge is going to start right here. So I think we'll be fine though. So anyway, once I get that, I need to transfer this line across to the other side. So we know where that curve starts here. So we'll make a mark here. It's about where that curve starts. And then our curve we have kind of ending at about where I have this. So right there. So we're just going to kind of mimic this curve a little bit. So at least it's somewhat close to that other side. Like that. So we're pretty close. So now I just need to do the center lines. Okay, so I would actually recommend, I mean, not everybody has money for this, but so this little slab right here is a piece of quartz. And I actually went to, so if you go to construction sites or anything like that and happen to go while they're doing this, doing the countertops, they'll usually give you these offcuts for free because, well, this is actually the cutout of a sink. They just cut it out and they throw it away. But quartz and granite, they're known for having nice flat surfaces. So I would get one of these and then a height gauge, which some of these are really expensive. And I understand that if you're a machinist, then you probably want the absolute most accurate you can get. But because this, what I do isn't that accurate, you don't have to be that accurate. You have to be accurate, but not, machinist accurate. this one from grizzly.com. It was relatively inexpensive and it works fantastic. I mean, you've seen me use a pencil in there. I mean, all I did was ground this down a little bit so the pencil fits inside of here. But anyway, so all I do is I take my piece, or I take my height gauge, and I go all the way down to the ground, or all the way down to the surface. I run this, loosen that up, run this to 0, and then I go up, and I get the height of my workpiece. So 1.8 or so about 3/16. And I go half of that, which will be 90, which is 3/32. And like I said, just close. You don't have to be exact middle. But once you have that, then you can run a center mark on the back, spin this around, run a center mark on the front, and then you flip it over and do the same thing. That way, even if you're off center, you all of a sudden have 2 marks that have gone from each side, and then between those 2 marks, you're going to be nice and centered. Before I get going, I want to show you a couple quick tips on when you're grinding recurves right here. Because so typically what we do is we put our knife on the bevel and we just get our angle, and then we drag it straight across and then pull it out for the tip, right? So because we're laying flat on here, we're never going to be able to follow this recurve. This line is actually going to come down and it's just going to be straight across. So in this case, what we want to do when we do this inside curve right here, we actually want to pull it off of the platen like this, and we'll get our angle and then pull it off of the platen and then drag it across until you hit close to the apex of this outside curve right here, and then you can start pulling it around like that. That way, by just using the edge, you've created a surface that can follow this curve. In the end, that's going to make it look so much better if your bevel follows the edge than if you follow this curve and then straight across, and all of a sudden your bevel is just kind of blah looking. So hopefully that part makes sense. And then as far as a plunge line, that's going to be one of the last things we do because that's the easiest spot to mess up. So when we get done with these bevels up to here, basically we're going to go over here and we're going to find our angle, and we're going to hold that angle, and we're going to come over here and we're just going to start kind of jabbing at this, working away, and then checking every time we go. We have a guideline right here knowing exactly where we want to start that plunge line. So we can come up close, and then as soon as we get really close to having this finished, then we hit, right back to where we want to be. And because this is a curve like this instead of a flat plunge line, we're going to angle this knife this way so that we can kind of follow this curve this angle right here. And then we'll basically just kind of go in and feather it out until we hit that plunge line. Hopefully that all makes sense. I think once we start doing it, it'll make a little more sense to you. Okay, I think I'm ready to go here. So I'm using an 80 grit. I don't think we really need to worry about going down to a 36. One thing I hate about that is if you accidentally, turn a little bit too much, like this direction, and hit up here, that's 36 grit scratches you have to get out of there. So 80 grit, a little less aggressive, and plus this is a small blade, so we'll go through this pretty quickly. So the other thing is, when you put this on the belt, err on the side of hitting the edge versus the bevel line, because if you hit here first and turn it this way, then if you go past your bevel line, then, well, you've gone past your bevel line and there's kind of no fixing it. I mean, you can fix it, but your blade's going to be thinner. So try to hit closer to the edge side first and then drop it down to your angle. So here we go. After I get my other light on here. And then don't be afraid to get up close to this grinder. Get a little more stability. And I'm tracking my belt this direction so it overhangs a little bit. Don't forget to cool your blade. And when I do the other side, I'm going to track the belt the other direction. So right here, when I'm starting at this area, I've turned my knife out a little bit so that I can get on the inside of that recurve. And also remember, you don't have to do the whole bevel in one movement. You can do the front side and then get to the, front side and then get to the back side. But at some point you just have to blend them together. Okay, I'm going to start digging in closer to this plunge line. And when I do that, I'm going to make sure, instead of having my blade straight across a platen, that I'm going to turn it so this angle right here is perpendicular to the platen. So I'm just going to get my angle and then start kind of poking away at that. You can see it took a little chunk out of there. So you can kind of see, you know, we're just taking little chunks until we kind of meet and blend in this little spot. We're not going to go all the way to the plunge, or all the way to the scribe line yet. Or we're going to try not to anyway. Sometimes mistakes are made. Okay, so you can see we're pretty close. It's ugly, but we're close. So we're gonna get the other side done. And then as soon as I get the other side up there, we're gonna put a 120 grit on here. So put your angle where you want it and just start biting away. And if you can't tell, I rest my finger on the platen to kind of help give me a little stability when I'm doing this. And again, because I'm on the inside curve, I'm angled. I'm not flat on the platen like this, I'm angled out like that. Okay. Okay, so you can see right here, obviously not pretty, but we're getting really close to that bevel line. So I'm going to throw some 120 on, and then we'll get this even closer to finished, if not finished. I sometimes finish at 120, but if I feel confident about the grind, I'll go to 220. It just makes the hand sanding a little easier. Okay, 120's on, and I'm going to slow the belt down just a little bit. Usually the higher the grit, the slower I want the belt. And especially when I'm getting close to finished. So first thing is I'm going to work from about here around, and I'm going to do that in sections. So when I get to the point, I'm just going to work on getting that where I want it. And then we'll work on the plunge line. And make sure to overhang your belt a little bit. And I am not pressing hard at all. I don't want to take too big of bites. So as you can see here, I'm up to that bevel line. So I'm going to focus from here to here. And by doing that, I'm going to take this knife and I'm going to turn it this way and then just focus on that area. The other good thing about turning it is it's easier to see where you haven't quite hit. So you can see my lines are going this way with 120. I hope you can see. 120, they're going this way, and the 80, they're still going this way, right up here at the front. So I know where I need to work that. Just a little bit at a time. Almost there. Okay, we're really close. I'm just gonna leave it there. Okay, now you can see just a teeny bit here right at the tip, but we're in a really good spot up here on the bevel line. So I'm gonna work this back end right here and see if I can't get my plunge line exactly where I want it. And I've got the belt hanging a little more than I normally would off this way. That way it creates, instead of a hard line at the plunge, we're creating a nice curve because the belt will flex a little bit. Okay. Right there. Now we gotta work on the other side. So I'm gonna track the belt back to the left. Again, just nice light lines. If you're close to your center up here and not quite to your bevel line, just make sure that when you have this against the platen, you're putting pressure to whatever direction you need to move the most. So if you need to take more off the edge, pressure this way. If you need to take more toward the bevel, pressure this way. Now I'm back to where I need to start blending in the tip area. Not quite up to the bevel line there, so I'm gonna work on just that. So I was a little thick right in the belly of this edge, so I kind of had to work that a little bit on the side that I was farther away from the center mark. And we're looking pretty close. I have to take a little more off of the edge section right here on this side of the blade. But first I'm gonna work on this plunge line on this side. So we're gonna track off of the platen just a little bit more and start kind of chipping away at this guy. See, I'm not quite getting the curve that I want to match this side, so I'm going to track the belt back that way just to give this a little bit harder edge to kind of hit the inside of that curve a little bit. Almost there. Okay, I think we're good. So now I need to track this back left just to get that plunge line a little smoother. Okay. We're looking good on that side. Looks like I need to hit up here just a little bit more, just to flatten that out a bit. There we go. Okay, and then like I said, I've just got to get a little bit in the belly on the edge on this side. And that is looking pretty good. Okay, with this ready for hand sanding, before I do that, I'm going to kind of chamfer the back side of this just a little bit, just to take these really hard corners off. And I'm going to do that with a 400 grit belt. And then also, I'm going to put my small wheel on and kind of do the same thing here. Or I might actually just do that with the rotary tool. But definitely got to get the back side of this. So like I said, 400 grit. The last grit we did on this was 220. So 400 should get us to where we want. finished grinding's done, and you can see right here that we've hit really close to our bevel lines. And then same thing on this side, almost perfect. But you can see, you know, there's one spot right up here toward the tip that you can still see some rougher grits on. But that's one good thing about kind of being able to twist this, is you can see where you're not quite flat and everything. But this is so small that it's going to come right out in the hand sanding. This is a perfect example of why I don't like a jig. If this was on a jig, this bevel line right up toward the top, it would go, so it would follow our edge, and then when it got up toward the top, it would kind of like come out closer to the tip. I know you've seen it before. Almost any mass-produced knife, you can see that. It comes out, and then when you get to this tip where the curve is, just by turning it with the jig, it won't follow this edge exactly. So by not having this in a jig, I can actually take the blade and turn it on the grinder and then grind this whole area separate. So this is a perfect example of why I don't like using jigs. I'd rather just get better at freehand grinding, because it's a lot more versatile when grinding certain grinds. So anyway, with this done, we're going to head over to the hand sanding station, my favorite station in the whole entire shop, because it is so fun to hand sand. And we're going to get this thing looking pretty.